Hello there, my lovely jewelry makers. I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make these unisex coiled wirework bracelets. Now these are part of a collection of jewelry that I made. I'm going to have a playlist with all of them in the description box down below, and they all work perfectly together as a set, and you'll also be able to find them in my shop where I sell jewelry kits and tutorials. The link to that will also be in the description box down below. Otherwise, if you want to learn how you can make this bracelet, then keep watching. These are then the tools and materials that we'll need. First of all, the wire that I'm using is all regular round bare copper wire because I plan to oxidize my piece. And the first gauge here is a 1mm. This is going to be a base wire. Then I have a 0.8mm. This is going to be used to connect our coils. The 0.6mm here we're going to use to make the coils with. And then finally I have a 0.4mm, which will be a weaving wire. Then the tools we'll need is, of course, first of all, our flush cutter so we can cut our wire, chain nose pliers to help manipulate the wire, along with my tweezing nose pliers as well, and finally my 6-step bill making pliers to help make consistent loops. Another crucial tool is this coiling gizmo here. So it has a clamp where you can clamp it to your desk, and then it has these little holes where you can put your rod through. And in this case here I'm using the 3mm size, and we're then going to make our coils with this tool. Now I am going to leave the material list in the description box down below along with useful tips. Otherwise, let's get all our tools and materials ready and let's get started. So I attach the coiling gizmo to my desk, and then I add the rod that I'm using through one of the holes. I then attach the end of the wire around the handle, and I'm leaving the wire on the reel because it's hard to know exactly how much we're going to need, and it's easier just to coil it straight from the reel anyway. And then I'm literally just going to start turning the handle, creating a coil all the way along the rod. And you just want to make sure we don't have any overlapping wire, but also that the coil is nice and tight. And once we finish the coil here, we can just remove it from the rod. So just undo that wire and just slide it off. And I'm just going to cut off this little end. I'm not going to be using that. So we have clean ends on both of them. And I've also made two. So I've got two ready here of almost the full length of the rod. Then I just want to grab my two flat nose pliers here and place one, grab onto the first couple of coils on one end, and then with the other one, grab onto the first couple of coils on the other end, because what we need to do now is open up this coil here. So I've got hold of both ends, and then we just want to gently start pulling them apart so we can start to see gaps between the coils here, and just do it slowly and try and get it as even as possible. We don't want to pull it too far apart, but just so we can see there would be enough space to get another wire down through. So just something like this, and then of course we just want to do the same with the other one. And then I'm just going to go in and cut off the last few little coils there that we had hold of with our pliers, just because they're not as even as the rest. So just to clean up the ends. Then I want to take my 2 lengths of coils here, and we need to turn them into 4 lengths. So I'm going to take my flush cutters, and we basically need to cut each of them in half. So you can measure to find the midpoint, or you can just judge it and just cut them in half. So this one length has now turned into 2, and then we want to do the other one as well, so we end up having 4 lengths. And then what we need to do now is start attaching these together. And to do that, I'm cutting 3 lengths of my 0.8mm of about 30 centimeters each, and you just want to make sure that these are nice and straight. So I'm grabbing one of those lengths first of all, and then 2 of my coils, and then I want to start attaching these together. So what we're going to do is on one end, make sure the ends are even there, so we start in the same place, and then just start interlocking them. So kind of push the coils into each other from the side, and then as you do that, we want to feed this wire through where the 2 coils are meeting up basically. So the very point on the end where it's going through both of them, but they're both still only partly connected. And then you just want to start feeding this all the way through, making sure we don't miss any coils, and we also don't kind of misalign them or get them doubled up. And you can see it kind of wants to naturally twist, but don't worry about that. We can always straighten it out. Just keep pushing it all the way through until the other end. Now, as you can see on mine as well, that my coils aren't very even. Don't worry about that at all. We can always trim them however we need to. Just make sure they're long enough for the length that you need. And then you have the wire coming out the other end. And that's the first 2 coils connected. Then I'm going to grab another length of wire that we cut ready, and the coils are just connected. And then bring in a new coil to connect to these, and it doesn't matter where you then place it, but we just want to place it on the side of one of them, and same principle, feed it into the opposite side of the other one like that. And then the same again, just start feeding this through where they overlap with each other and make your way all the way to the other end. And then we just want to bring in the last coil and repeat the same thing. So feed that in to the side of one of the others, and then feed the last length of wire through all the way to the other end until we have all 4 coils connected. So now we've got all 4 attached here. You can see it's got quite a twist twist to it. So what we just want to do now is straighten this out. So you just start from one end and basically work against the twist to straighten the coils out. You can also do this while you're putting the wires through to connect them. Completely up to you when you find the easiest, but just keep going all the way down until you straighten the whole thing out. Then once it's straight, I want to just sort out the ends here. So we just want to cut off the excess. You can see it's not quite even. Some of them are a little bit longer or shorter than the other ones. So I just want to cut off the excess and you can just push them off the wires, just so we get more of a straight line across. And then what I like to do is, you might find that some of these are sticking out a little bit, so they might catch or scratch on skin or clothes. To avoid that, I'm just going to grab the very end and bring it further in, and then just squeeze it tighter so the end itself comes further in towards the base wires that we brought through, and just do the same with the other ones. And then what we need to do is, of course, also get the right length of these. So I'm just going to cut mine down to about 6 inches. So I'm just going to measure from one end there. And then I can see where I need to cut off the excess of the coils, because you can see they all go beyond that, but they're also different lengths anyway. So what I'm going to do is, I know this is where I want to cut, and then I can just start from one side, cut through the coil. Now be careful you don't cut the actual base wire 0.8mm there that's running through the coils. You just want to cut the actual coils themselves. So just do them one at a time, all the way from one side to the other. And then you can start to kind of bring the coils apart. Now you might find that they're still a little bit connected to each other. Some of the wires are still catching on each other. So if you need to just undo that to then be able to pull it off completely. Like that. So we have the excess off now, and we also now have the length of the coils that we need. Then what I also want to do is just finish off the ends of the 0.8mm here that's going through the coils and connecting them, but we at the same time need to make sure that we fasten them, because they can still pull through. If we just pull at them, they're going to undo the coils there. So I just want to make sure that that's not going to happen. So just one at a time, I'm going to cut down the excess, but making sure I leave a short little tail like that, because then I'm going to grab my tweezer nose pliers and grab at the very end and then bend it back on itself, and in this case I'm bending it outward, and then straight all the way back on itself there. And we can tighten it a little bit, because then you should find that when we go to the other end and pull on the wire that I just cut, it should nestle in and catch nicely down in the coils up here. So we've made sure that no matter how hard you pull on this, it's not going to pull all the way through, and it's going to stay secured. And basically that's what I want to do with all of them. So just flip it to the other side and do the same thing with the other one here. And again, if I pull on the other end on the same wire there, it's not coming through. And of course, the one in the middle we also need to do. Now here, you just need to find what side you want it to go to for this little wire to fit into. So just bend it, same as the others, so it'll fit into one of those gaps there in the exact same way. And then of course, just turn it around and do the same thing on the other side here. Now when you do the other end, make sure that when you bend it, that you do it a little bit pulled out, so when you let go, it kind of springs back in and locks itself in place, because obviously the other end we've already finished off and we can't kind of pull on them anymore. So just finish off this end in the same way. Then we need to cut some more lengths of wire here. So what I have is 8 lengths of my 1mm of about 30 centimeters each. And then we need 2 lengths of a 0.4mm here of about 3 meters each. So these are going to be the weaving wires. So we then need to start putting some of our pieces together here. So I'm grabbing my length of coils and 4 lengths of the base wires that are cut ready of the 1mm, and then also 1 length of the 0.4mm here. And I'm just going to start with a bit at a time. So first of all, I'm taking 1 of my wire lengths, and then I just want to attach my weaving wire to this base wire. I'm just going to do that by wrapping it around a couple of times. So I've done 5 wraps now, and you just want to make sure you leave a decent length on the base wire, because we can use that later on. Now what I'm going to do is get into the weave first of all. So I'm going to bring in another base wire, lay that as the new top one, then go over the top of both of them, and then straight up between the two, bring in the next base wire, lay that as the new top one, then bring the weaving wire over the top of them like that again. And as I'm doing that, I'm also kind of pushing it downwards towards the wraps that I've already done. Bring in the last base wire, place that as the new top one, and then I'm coming up behind that to wrap over the top of that one by itself, so just down between the top two, and then push that down. Make sure all your wraps are nice and tight, but at the same time not overlapping each other. Then I'm going to go down 2 base wires, so I'm coming up between the bottom two, so I can go over the top of the middle two, because basically that single wrap we did at the top is the very middle, you could say. And now we're working our way back down on the other side, then come all the way down behind, go over the top of the bottom two, and go straight down between the two middle base wires, and keep pushing everything nice and tight. And then we can just wrap around the bottom wire by itself again. And now we're going to do the single wraps on the bottom wire, and they're kind of going to be the spacing between the little flourishes, you could say. And it's really up to you how many wraps you want to do, because how many wraps determines how far spacing there is between each little flourish, and that's completely up to you. So I'm just going to do 5 again, and then I'm going to get straight into the next little flourish, which is exactly the same that I showed you there, except now we don't have to add the wire in, that's already done. So I'm going to go over the top of the bottom two base wires, which means I'm going down right between the middle two, then come up between those two that we just went over the top of, go over the top of the middle two base wires, so we can bring the wire upwards now behind the top one to wrap around that one by itself, come down between those top two, and then work our way back down again. So up between the bottom two, we can wrap over the top of the middle two, and then all the way down behind to come right down between the middle two, and there we go. And then now we just want to start the single wraps again, but before we do that, I just want to then also now start incorporating in my coils. And the way that I'm going to incorporate it is by going to the very end of the weaving wire and then taking my coils here, and I'm just starting on one side. So basically what we want is for these lengths of base wires with the weave to sit along one side of the coils there. So we need to attach them along the way. So I'm just going to take the very end there and go down through, not the very first coil, but the second one in, and just literally go down through from the top to the bottom. So it comes out there, but making sure I catch the wire and then pull it close to our other wires here, and then we just want to make sure it's going to sit properly. And then I'm going to bring the weaving wire back up between these two pieces. Now obviously because this is the first one, it's going to be quite loose at the moment and a bit fiddly, but just get it nice and tight. And then I'm going to just go down between the bottom two base wires, because I'm going to go straight back into the weave, and I'm just going to coil around the bottom base wire because I'm doing the in-between bit, and then just pull that nice and tight, and make sure that your coils are also nice and close together. You can always use pliers to help push any wire into place, and then just coil around here the same amount of times you've done before, which in my case is 5. And then I reach the point in the weave where I'm going to do another little flourish there, but before I do, I just want to make another connection point between the wires here and the coils. So I'm just bringing the wire up between, and then again grabbing the very end, and then we just need to find the place in the coils that correspond to where we are in the weave. So you just want to find that place and then go down through that single coil just like we did before, from top to bottom, making sure you catch the wire in the coil, and then pull it all the way through, and then just pull it tight, and then straight away come up between the two again. So we can do that figure of 8 weave when we're connecting. In this case here, because I've done the 5 wraps around the bottom wire by itself, I'm just going to go straight into the flourish. So over the top of the bottom two base wires, up between them, and you can see it's still pretty loose, but just a couple more connection points and it'll be a lot more sturdy to hold on to. Then down between the top two base wires, and then go around the top one by itself, and come down the other side by coming up between the two bottom ones, over the top of the middle ones, all the way down behind just the base wires there, and down between the middle ones, and there we go. And again, if you need to, you can always use your pliers to help push it close. You can get into tighter spaces than you can with your fingers. And then just the way that I like to do it is basically do the connection points just before I start a flourish, and then also just after every time I do one. So that's the point that I'm at now. So again, get to the end and then just have a look at your piece and your coils there, and then just find the coil that fits with where you are in the weave. Go straight down from the top to the bottom, pull the wire all the way through. So we just catch onto the coil there as we pull it tight, come up between the coil and the base wires, and then just start wrapping around the bottom base wire by itself, because that's then the in-between wraps that we're doing now. And you basically just want to keep doing this all the way along, catching the coils to the wires while making the weave until we reach all the way to the other end. So now I made it all the way to the other end here. Then we just want to flip it around and grab our other 4 base wires and the other length of weaving wire, and basically we want to start doing the exact same thing with these on the other side, working our way from one end to the other and just doing the exact same thing thing as we did down here. So now we got all the weaving done, we need to finish off the ends, and I've also made sure to just weave a little bit beyond the coils themselves. Then I'm going to start bringing the two sides together. So grabbing all of the base wires as if they were one, and then bringing them over towards the opposite side, making sure we get a nice curve into it, and then same with the other ones. So just have them overlapping. It doesn't matter which one is on top and which one is below, but just have them overlapping like this, and then my weave where they end meet up nicely in the middle there. And obviously if you need to, you can always add a bit more or take a bit away, but I'm happy with where my weave is, so I'm just going to cut off the excess of the weaving wires because we are done using that now. So cut off the excess on both of them, and then just make sure to push the ends down and roll them in the direction that the wrap is going, so we don't have any wire ends sticking out and catching or scratching on either skin or clothes. Then I'm going to grab the wires that are at the top here, and where they're crossing over the other ones, I'm going to hold on to them so they stay in place, and just flip them to the back and start bending them, all of them together, around towards the back around the other ones, and just make sure everything stays in place. So basically bend them towards the back around the other wires until we have something a bit like that. Then I like to just go in and squeeze them down a bit so they get tighter around the other wires there. I'm going to go in and cut off the excess on the back here. Now I'm making sure that after where they've crossed over the other wires, I just want to leave a few millimeters to where I then cut them off, and just go all the way across and cut them all off. So we're left with these short little tails that I then want to grab onto the very end of them and just bend them inwards a bit. So kind of almost flick the ends inwards towards themselves, and then go in and just push them down again to have them sit nice and tight around the other wires. So also these ends are not sticking outward, but they're actually kind of going back in towards themselves. And then this is what the front looks like. So it looks nice and neat from the front. Now the other wires, first of all, we just need to separate one out. So before we bend them, I'm just going to take the one at the very tip here and bend that straight out as if it's continuing from the bracelet like that. And then the other three that we now have left in this group, I'm going to bend around the back now over the top of the other ones that we bent. So same principle, there's just three now instead. Bend them back over themselves and over the other lengths. Then go in and cut off the excess of those, again making sure to leave short little ends of the wire after where they've bent over the other ends. And then also just make sure to kind of flick the ends inwards towards themselves before we then also go in and squeeze them tighter. And you just want to make sure you put your finger over so you can't feel anything. And once you feel that's nice and tight, what we have left is this length of wire here that we can use, either make a full clasp with it, or what I'm going to do is just make a loop. So I'm going to take my pliers, place them a little bit above where the wire is coming out, put a bend into it, then take my 6-step bail making pliers and make a loop. Just going to use the smallest step, bring the end of the wire all the way around the pliers until we create a full circle. Then I place my pliers on the circle to hold it in place, while I then take the end and wrap it around the little space that we left before we made the circle, and wrap it nice and tight a few times until you haven't got any more space. Then go in and cut off the excess. And then don't forget, we just need to make sure to squeeze that end down so that isn't sticking out and catching or scratching on anything either. And there we then have our loop, which we can attach our clasp to. Now just flip the bracelet around and do the same thing on the other end. So now I've finished off both ends here, and you can then attach your findings. Now I'm just going to attach my findings once I've oxidized this, but what you then want to do is start shaping it. So you can shape it around something that has the size and shape you want it to have, like a bracelet mandrel, or you can use your hands and fingers. So you just want to go into one place, making sure obviously the front is pointing outward, and then put a curve into it. Now don't go into a place and just put a big bend, that'll put it out of shape, but just gradually add more and more of a curve, going back and forth like this until we bring the two ends closer together and can use a clasp. And then you have your finished bracelet ready to wear. So don't forget, you can check out my shop where I sell jewelry kits and tutorials, and these bracelets will also be available. You'll find the link straight to it in the description box below. And while you're there, you can also sign up for my newsletter so you don't miss out on any future updates. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.